everybody. Thank you for joining us today. And I think you're very smart to join us today because I think there's going to be a tremendous learning opportunity. So I've got a little blurb here on our first speaker, Peter Tanuseputro. So he's an MD, PhD. He has affiliation with the Bruyère Research Institute, the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute. He's an assistant professor in palliative care, and his research mainly uses linked, routinely collected data. So this is ICES data to develop population perspective on aging and end of life. And you might have seen him in the news, you might have read him in the newspaper, you might have listened to his patient interview, which is really quite compelling and really gives you an interesting perspective on the impact of the work that we're doing. But what's not in here, this is the little blurb that Peter gave us, is that he is specifically, you're good, you're okay? Okay. I've asked him to come here because of and talk to us about manuscript writing, because Peter has the most amazing track record in securing CAHR grants. I know I'm going to make him blush, and he's very humble. No. And I don't know what the numbers are, but I know that every time we meet, oh yeah, we did get that grant. Oh yeah, we did, and we ranked whatever. He has obviously developed a winning approach. We're all successful researchers here, but this is an outstanding track record. So I think that we, despite sort of being established researcher, we have a lot to learn, and we want to hear from Peter. So I'm not sure how you ended up setting up your talk, but
well, I think it's going to be more of a discussion more than me talking, hopefully.
And I'm delighted to have Peggy and Heidi join us today. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, Simone is too kind, and we always say as well that researchers are a team sport, right? So it's not just me, obviously, it's the entire team. And so I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But yeah, I think when Simone asked me to do this, I kind of agreed almost sheepishly, I would say. Because, I'm still starting off, and I certainly don't have all the answers, and there's a lot more seasoned researchers in the room. But I thought what I'll do is kind of share our formula when it comes to writing grants. We definitely have a formula, and the problem is that everything I'm going to tell you kind of already know. But it's things that often I see when reviewing other grants that are actually not there. All of it is common sense, but I think it's a recipe that a lot of people know, but don't necessarily follow. So at any time, jump in, and I'll ask everyone in the room as well to chip in your comments and your input. So I have no conflicts of interest to declare. I do have a few declarations, though. First of all, again, I'm a junior investigator. I just got my appointment. So again, I'm not as seasoned as many of the people in the room. I've also had a really awesome mentor. And again, research is, a lot of the things I'm going to channel today is probably things that I'm channeling through, what my mentors have told me, right? People like Doug Manuel. And I do have an A team, not a B team, not a C team. I have an A team, and I think a big part of our success is, the A team. So here's a picture of our team in our last team meeting. So there's Doug. So that's he's kind of like a mastermind of our team in some ways. Obviously as a junior investigator, you try to distance yourself in some ways and establish yourself independently. And obviously we all do that. But his sayings out of it when it comes together. There's Carol. Carol Bennett is our research partner who does a lot of the reading of our grants to make sure it's legible and make sure it's smooth. Okay. And I don't know if people can guess who Mr. T is, but that's Amy. She's the muscle in our team, and I could say it's bad attitude. That's his nickname, right? But it's not. Amy's just probably, Amy's very easygoing, but we're all easygoing in our team. And again, I might not tell you anything that you already don't know, okay? But the team is a big part of the success, obviously. Our track record, so what Simone has told, what's kind of alluded to, these are some of the grants that myself as lead or co-lead have gone over the last 4 years. So we've been moderately successful. We've gotten a lot of CRHR grants. And this doesn't include like Doug's grants and things like that because he has other stuff that I'm not involved in and that I'm not leading. But we have a handful of CRHR grants, some soft grants, right, as well, like from the Ministry of Health. We have a soft grant to Bruyère Big Data. Well, I mean, that's a big part of that is Bruyère Foundation's help, but we have foundation grant support as well. And we recently got Heidi, myself, and others have gone at the Ministry of Health HSRF grant as well. Okay, so that's our track record. So outline today. So I'm not going to talk about salary support. I'm not going to talk about salary awards. I have a miserable track record in getting those. So, maybe you guys can tell me, how to get those. But I'm going to talk about open operating project grants. Okay, and what are the keys to success to that? So I have two sections. So first section, and I give this, I think, seminar a couple of years ago to the students in the Bruyère seminar series. So the first question is, 5 questions that you should ask yourself before even applying to a grant, right? Should you apply for a grant? Should you not? Okay. The one pager. So I'm not going to go through, when to start writing a grant. Everyone's different. Internal review process. We have a really bad, admittedly bad, style when it comes to writing grants. It's always last minute, like down to the wire. So that's probably not how to do it. But one thing that we find, extremely helpful is the one pager. Okay. So anytime we start a project, a grant, anything, it always starts with the one pager. And we often take, a couple weeks to kind of just hash out the one pager, and we take a week or two to write the grant. But it's always the one pager that's important. And I'll go through what's in the one pager that we typically create. And 7 quick tips on writing grants. Okay, and 7 things that we always consider and we always make sure is in the grant when we write it. And discussion throughout. Okay, so before getting started, I think the first question is, do you really want to do this, right? There's 3 scenarios, right? You either love it, it's your job. I think it's, sometimes it's just your job and you have to do it, or you hate it, right? It's a lot easier to write grants when you do like it, right? And I think it seems like a silly point, but in some ways, even if you hate grant writing, I think one of the keys to writing grants is to make sure you have a time and place to write the grants. So what I mean by that is that with any writing, I think we find that, for me and for a lot of people in our team members, it's about finding writing sessions, right, where you can dedicate and block, a specific time where you can write your grant. So often, we hate writing grants because it's on the wayside, right? Like we're trying to do it while we answer emails or, while we do a million other things. No, so typically for myself, for example, I do most of my grant writing on Sundays, between like 3 to 6, So I just block up that time, put on my headphones, listen to music, and what I like to do is do stream of consciousness writing. I don't know how people like to write grants, but I don't put in any references. I don't put in any major, details. I just write out the top of my head, after the one pager, obviously, after you have clear objectives and clear structure for your grant, and you just write it. And I think to me, that's the most effective. Because when you put in references, when you stop here and there to put in appendices, it just stops your flow. And writing grants is the thing where it's writing anything. You just have to find a block of time where you get momentum and you have this, you establish sort of a stream, right, of writing consciousness. And I think I don't want to undervalue that because that is so important to writing actually something that's coherent and something that's not choppy all throughout, right? Okay, so the second thing that we always ask is what's the success rate of the grant? I think, for sure, well, one thing I like to say is, well, you're in the major leagues if you bat 250, right? If you get a hit, 1 every 4, you're successful, you're in the major leagues. And same thing with grants, right? That's just the reality these days. We hear often about, successes, but, when I show you all the grants, I didn't show you our failures. Okay, so, but, I think you have to keep that in mind because, you just move past quickly the failures and just move on to your next grant. Failures are normally not the exception. Obviously, that's pretty common. So this, often we do this, right? We do a face plant on our grants, and I think it's just really important to just pick yourself up. Okay, despite the success rate, I think a lot of us are intimidated by the CRHR operating rate success rates, but not all grants are 13%. So some of our grants, even CIHR, have a success rate of 25, 30, even 50%, right? So you often you have to find these niche
grants, I think, where the success rate is much higher. So our Quick Strike grant, I mean, we ranked first anyways, but I think it was like 40% of the grants submitted was successful. The last one I saw, I think it was personalized health grant. I don't know if you guys saw the Catalyst grant for CIHR. It was to create personalized health applications, e-health applications. But there was one stream where all 9 applications got funded. And it was about sex and gender considerations. We all do sex and gender things in our research, right? And it was pretty obvious, like from reading the grant, that if you submit to that one stream, you would have a pretty good success because no one thinks about submitting to sex and gender, and it's a priority for CIHR, right? So, especially starting off like with my own research career, I think what Doug and others have helped me with is attaching myself to larger grants as well. So apart from the competitive grants, attaching yourself to larger grants for more experienced researchers, I think it's winning kind of formula to get your research career started off, especially if you're trying to start off a research career. So the first grant I was ever part of was actually Walter Witch's HSPRN grant from HSRF, and it was just like write up one paragraph for me. Walter asked me, and I wrote up a paragraph of 1 pager, and he just he let me into, and he mentored me on his team. So things other software grants, you can't discount the value of software grants. So we've gone a grant from the Bruyère data from the foundation, and that's all about relationship building. Relationship building to the donors, but also with the foundation. I think one of the things I'll like to do is just take responsibility for all your successes and failures. Whenever we get research from a grant, it's easy to obviously say that the reviewers don't understand what you're saying, but everything's up to you, right? And same thing with relationship building and getting these software grants. Often I make the time to go to the Ministry of Health and meet with them for an hour in Toronto, and just that face-to-face. I'm not going to do it over telephone because that face-to-face helps to build trust. It helps to build relationships that often gets to these software grants. I think I meant to put the Ministry of Health at Quilt was a software grant, but in some ways, in a lot of these grants, they're not soft, but you can get them by being strategic too, right? So with the Quilt grant, for example, these big HSRF grants, we knew that ministry had several thematic priorities, and we knew that they were going to fund a project, at least one project from each theme, right? So when we initially started, we sent in our LOI, but we were thinking, why are we going to compete with other people who's going to compete for the same dollars? So what we did, we followed what family medicine did, actually, quite frankly, and it's, I called up the other centers, and I said, let's put in a submission together, right? And so we did that. We put in 3 LOIs together. That's what they want. The Ministry of Health wants, network grants, and we submitted 1 LOI, and we were the only game in town, right? So in some ways, even when it's not a soft grant, I think, especially with ministry grants, a lot of them, you don't game them, but you definitely want to be strategic about them, right? And part of that strategy, was obviously finding, for example, finding a lead that can lead the network. So we had Peter walk in, and we had Heidi step in, and I think that's smart, right? The ministry wants someone who's in the lead, who's a leader, and Heidi is a leader. I'm not, and finding someone who can help you lead, who's obviously in that position, I think really helps with the strategy, right? So a lot of grantmanship is strategy building, and if you try to submit a project grant for an HSR grant, it's just not worth it. You just have to find the right fit, right? And HSR grants are network grants across the province, and led by people who are leaders in the field, who are known, and that's part of the grantmanship that you need to do before you even get started. I'm going to pause there because I said a lot of things. Anyone agree, disagree with me, or?
Yes, you are a leader, so let's take that opportunity. But I think one of the things that you said, and this is something that I've seen at the university, when I had a leadership role at the university, we tried to have this sort of idea of team building and sharing and collaboration. And what I got a pushback on, often from more junior scientists, is I don't want anybody else telling me what I should do. Right? So rather than looking at this opportunity to work with people, it was looked at as more of perhaps a threat. So have you seen that with your team? Like, how do you deal with that? And, and what would you suggest or recommend to people?
I think first, I think you don't work. I think we personally don't work with anyone we can't get along with. You work with someone, right? That's I think number one. I think the philosophy is you try to work with someone once, and if it doesn't work out, you just don't do it again, right? So that's number one. Sometimes you just can't change people. And secondly, I don't know if I think we try to instill that right from the beginning of all our collaborations, that it's not the I, it's the team, right? It sounds so silly, but if the team wins, everyone wins, right? And, in that way, you have to find collaborators who are willing to share, right? With this HSRF, I think that was exactly it, like that. And you're right, Heidi, like I see a lot of junior investigators are even if they're the NPI, they're hesitant in putting someone as a co-PI. I'm like, why not? Like you don't lose, right? I don't have an answer. I think we try to instill that philosophy in the team, and I think part of that is the team philosophy that you start off, right? And that's just something that we established right from the beginning, that we win if you win if we all win. That's not an answer.
No, that's something that Bill had instilled in this research group. Like every time someone new came on, then they were just added to teams. And that's how, then eventually they might build their own niche, but that's definitely part of the winning thing. I have a question around, you say you meet with the ministry, and so how is it that you would establish your contact with the ministry? And, I think we'd all be willing to go to Toronto and meet with the ministry if they were interested in meeting with us about our project and so on. So maybe tell us about how that came.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is networking, right? Obviously, it's how do we find, for our grant for the Ministry for End of Life, it started with our first grant with Walter Witches, who's extremely connected, and then, us going to him and saying, basically, Walter, if you have any opportunities that the ministry asks you on questions, just being willing and open to answer them, right? So anytime there's a question about end of life, and it's about finding the right mentors, obviously, someone who's selfishly willing to help you. So Walter is like that. So he, when he gets an end of life question, he forwards it to me, and then you build your research program from there. I don't know exactly how we end up speaking, but we personally I speak with ministry contacts, CCO, HQO, 3-4 times a week, just because, well, I think just openness to help them out, right?
Okay.
I'll add to that, though, I think. So I do a lot of work with the government, and I think that the thing that people forget is, like, you're all experts in your areas, and the ministry is hungry for that expertise. And, they don't know what they don't know. Like, we often have to go in front of them and say, look, there's a barrier here, there's an issue in the system, but we believe we have a solution. So always go to them as a problem solver. So we've identified this, but we believe we can do this to address it, and we think that you can probably learn from it and scale it and possibly use it, apply it to the rest of the healthcare system. So that's the kind of stuff that they're interested in. Yeah. And I would encourage you, like, I have really great contacts at the Ministry of Health, as do other leaders at the hospital level. But even just calling up, like, it's not hard to navigate the site and figure out, like, who's the ADM of, a particular area, and then just call them and say, I'm so-and-so, I work in Ottawa, and you'd be surprised at how willing and open they are to actually meet with you, because they so really need the information, and they're really looking for solutions, because they're really stuck. They're often really stuck, right? So.
Thanks. That's so true. I think, and I think your point about proposing solutions is a super important one, because how we got our end of life grant was they came to us, how would you do this? And so we said, it's always a one-pager, right? You create a one-pager. This is how we, do it. And then they asked us, who else should we speak to in the province? So we give them a list of names. And I think when they went down the list of names, I know this for a fact, everyone, instead of focusing on the solutions, they said, well, we can't do this, we can't do that, It's kind of like a glass half empty kind of thing. So, but, we're like, no, we can do it. We have this data, this is step 1, 2, and 3 on how you would accomplish it, and this is exactly how we do it. So they went spoke to everyone around the province, and they came back to us because we're the only ones who were willing to say, yes, we can do it definitively, and this is exactly how we do it. So it's being completely glass half full, right? And question, yeah.
I went to a CIHR grant writing workshop about a month ago, and
Yeah.
they mentioned something about, because you mentioned wanting to work with leaders in the field and
Yeah.
having, the team, and they mentioned something about, not liking it when there are leaders in the field particularly put on a team and there's not enough explanation as to what their role is on the team.
Yeah, for sure.
So how have you sort of made sure that everyone on the team kind of that role is explained as opposed to just the names?
Oh, yeah, for sure. We definitely, like, whenever I'm on a SPI or NPI on a grant, I definitely get leaders in the field to step in, but they're not random people, right? So you're absolutely correct. Like, each person has to serve a purpose, right? And I'm going to show you an example of that. And some of it, it's true. Like, when you put random people on the grant, the reviewers notice. They know, and they actually call you out on it, right? So in our team building page on CIHR, we always state, what exactly is every single person adding, right? And it's got to be, it's not lip service. It's, we bring them in because of their expertise. And a lot of people have a lot of different expertise. It's just about selling what the expertise is, how it fits in your grant. So it's part of the grant. Yeah. But that's a great point.
Did you have a question, Iman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a question from Dr. Agnes Bruyère. Would you recommend targeting ministry grant pre-tenure, or do these grants take too much time away from publications?
It's a good point. So one of the questions I know that I have, that's Agnes, right? So Agnes is part of HSP grant, so Agnes knows Walter as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's never too early, right? Never too early.
Peter's track record.
And I don't have tenure. I'm not eligible for tenure. It doesn't matter. So publications are definitely part of the metrics to getting tenure. If you're speaking about tenure, but so is grants. So are grants, and they want you to be connected with policymakers, decision makers. So that's helpful. Okay, so the third question, and we'll go back to the discussion, is, the third question we ask is if a right fit. So this is really important, right? Sometimes, you try to jam your research idea into like the call. We never try to do that anymore because you'll just be deemed irrelevant. And, sometimes it's hard to know what you're looking for just when you call them up and you ask. Like, CIHR is very willing to discuss with you what the intent of the grant is, right? So, so many open calls, there are many open calls, but, a lot of them are targeted. And in some ways, yes, you want to apply for them if it seems like it's right for you, but you pick your battles, right? And the tip here that that I have is that grants are not the place to pick up new skills. Like, if you're gonna, if the grants start building apps, you want to say, I'm gonna learn how to build apps on this. You're gonna say, you want to say, I built this, and this app, and this is how I fit into the grant, right? And if you don't have that for yourself, then you find someone. If you also want to apply, then you find someone else on the team that will be part of it. You can have, that you can say you have a strong track record. So this is small question. So yeah, you don't want to take this to the grave, right? Just by putting a square peg in a round hole. It just doesn't work. Okay, the fourth, very related, is you have previous work to support the application, right? So we always ask, when we think about project ideas, it's not. I'll go through this too, but we do a lot of brainstorming sessions. And the idea that normally we have 5, 6 different ideas for these open operating grants. And we choose one of the criteria is we choose the ones that we have previous work. It's so much easier when you have previous work, right? And previous work can be previous grants, previous papers, previous analysis, anything, right? And how tangibly that, turns out is that they all go into our appendix. This is how we will create the cohort. This is our sample size. This is our approach. We reference the detailed methods that we're gonna perform have been outlined here in this published paper, and that just makes you much more. It just obviously. It's so obvious, but you need to focus on grants that you have previous expertise on. It displays expertise, lower risk, right? It's proof of concept. So important part of it is obviously how ready you are to put it in a competitive grant. If you haven't done any work in the field, we rarely put in that effort to go in the grant. And the last question before we pause for discussion is, what are your priorities, obviously, right? So basically what I do is I look at the success rate, and then I think about what are my competing demands, right? You weigh against what you can get done. So to Agnes's point, you weigh against what you can be doing otherwise, right? So writing is basically, in place of writing grants, you can write papers. I think that's the one thing that goes hand in hand. So because it's all writing time, right? So it's papers or grants, and sometimes you need papers to write the grant. So it includes your work-life balance. There's a time and place for everything, including grants. So I write my grants 3 to 6 on Sundays. That's usually when I write it, and if I can't write within that time, I'm not going to apply for it, right? Just because you need to set boundaries on your work-life balance. Otherwise, it's just not going to be enjoyable, and you're not going to write a good grant, right? All common sense stuff. All about priorities, right? So, no, I don't want to come to your dog's birthday party, like I say, Mary. So it's all about what priorities you set, right? And what's important to you. And grant writing is the same thing. You have to like it. If it's not in your priority list and it seems like a drag and a competing demand to all your other things, then you're just not going to write a good grant. Okay, so those are the 5 questions. I'm going to pause and see if others have any tips, or if people have other questions that they ask themselves before they write a grant. Yes?
So one thing is also, do I have enough money right now to do what I need to do?
Yeah.
Because if you get another grant,
yeah,
then you have to do more work.
Yeah.
And so it's that balance too. Like at what point do you stop? Because it's like more money, more people, more,
Yeah,
and I think that's important.
It's really important. Yeah, it's something that we struggle with as well, right? Like, when do you stop, right? When is enough enough, and you just need to be productive. Yeah.
And I think what you outlined is also the real critical importance of papers.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's interesting, people sometimes find grant writing more fun than papers, but papers are so critical.
In fact, when we're measured in terms of success, papers count, I think, more than grants can even.
Yeah, and
at the university for promotion and things like that,
Yeah, it's a currency.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah, it is. Grants is part of the currency, but like tangibly in the Department of Medicine that I'm part of now, is papers and grants, and both, definitely most people get 60% of their points from publications, 40% from their grants. So I think in the university, it's probably more heavily weighted to publication, but yeah. But in the end, I think we're successful, and it doesn't really matter about, well, tenure is a huge deal, but in some ways, for us investigators in CT Lamont, I think it's about just being successful and liking what you're doing, right, in a lot of ways.
Just to let you know, Peter, we've got, I guess, about 21 minutes left,
Okay.
just to give you that.
That's perfect. Perfect. So, okay. So our grant writing approach, I'm just going to talk about 2 things that we do that I think are crucial. The actual writing of the grant, I already kind of chatted about, but I'm not going to tell you how to write your own grants, because some people like starting really early, having, again, initial review process, so on and so forth. That's all about style, I think. I mean, generally, I think that's good. But I think the 2 key successes in our team is brainstorming and the one-pager. Okay, so it's always about picking the right ideas and picking the right objectives for the right ideas. And that's, I would say, at least 50% of the grant, right? If you don't start with the right idea, you're sunk from the beginning. So our typical brainstorm session. So this is our retreat. So every year we have a retreat. So this year we had it in the Nordique, because we loved it so much from the CT Lamont's retreat. So as part of the retreat, we try to focus on the future, right? And what's the vision for the future? So what are those things that people actually see? How do people see the world changing in the future? And what are those research ideas that are important to look at for the future, right? And that's a big part of it. Here's another brainstorm. This was the year before, where we had our writing. We have writing retreats sometimes. Well, I don't know why I put in quotation, but we have writing retreats where we write. This was, anyone recognize where this was? This was in the Simpsons bar at Universal Studios.
Oh.
So, but anyways, we try to build part of retreat is fun and collegiality, obviously. But brainstorming is number one. Secondly, is the one pager. So again, we spend like half our time doing the one pager. What goes into one pager? There's 4 things for us that goes into one pager. The first is the imperative, right? So the imperative has to be specific. You know, you see this all the time in grants where you say the population is aging. You know, for our work, you know, there's a lot more aging people in the population. You know, the healthcare sector is strapped or is overburdened. Not helpful. Okay, I mean you can put it like one line. Okay, but you got to move away from generalities into more specifics, right? So. The things that we like, what I like to put, what is the burden? So burden numbers are great. Pancreatic cancer is the 4th most, common cancer. Number 1 in terms of death, right? That makes sense. That's very specific. What is the gap in science? How are you going to fill the gap? So there has to be an imperative in the science. It can't be just a gap in the topic, but it has to be a gap. I think it will be helpful if you fill a gap in the science. So whether that's advancing methods or advancing whatever, X, Y, and Z, right? How's the issue topical? So this, I think, is really important, right? So what are those policy, clinical, legislation windows that you're trying to take advantage of? What are those local, provincial initiatives that you're taking advantage for? So, for our home care grant, we say the Trudeau government recently, invested $3 billion in home care. In Ontario, this is going to be $1 billion. Part of that money is going through the Ontario Palliative Care Network that we are part of, and we're going to impact change by informing, this recent investment in funds by saying what's evidence-based. And we have, we're part of these working committees, that it's informing the change. And so you have to find the windows, right, that make your grant attractive. And if there's no window, it's tougher, right? If you can make the imperative on why this is important, whether it's local initiatives, provincial initiatives, federal initiatives, you have to put it in there, and it's got to be specific. Does everyone agree with that? Like finding the imperative, right? And being specific, because no one wants to read the generalities, because you kind of glaze, and everyone does it, including ourselves, right? But we try to stay away from generalities. 5 or so objectives. So we always have objectives. We like them. I like them to be sequential. You see objective 1 leading to objective 2, objective 3, without being over the line. So you can still do objective 2 if objective 1 fails, right? Another practical aspect is it needs to be on the first page or 2. Like, I don't know how many times I read grants where the background section is the first 3 pages, and like, why am I reading this? Like, I don't even know what the project is, right? And it's a lot easier to read the rest of the grant when you know what the project objectives are. Then you can say, okay, I know exactly why they're saying this. I know exactly why, where this method fits into the objectives. Yeah, smart, but this is okay. So this is an example of our objectives. This is one that we're writing right now. I'm writing right now with Michelle Howard. So we had this idea. Let's look at physician care at the end of life. That's topical. There's OPCNs working on that. There's changes in remuneration. OMA is in negotiations. Why not? Let's look at physician care and let's look at end of life. Everyone's talking about end of life. A lot of healthcare initiatives. So we picked this. Okay. So our 4 objectives: describe the delivery of physician care in the last month of life. Our first objective usually is descriptive, like describe the lay of the land, right? Before you get into like the more evaluative kind of this does this, this does that. I think it's very helpful to just describe the lay of the land in any of our work. So it's always describe something. So describe the delivery of physician care in the last month of life. Who's delivering care? What's a mix of care? Second is you transfer into more evaluative things. So in this case, we look at to identify predictors of continuing care. So we thought the angle here, the nice angle to put what no one has ever done, the gap in the science, is no one has ever looked at continuity of care in terms of physician care. So you have palliative care specialists, palliative care generals, you have medical specialists. How does it translate into continuum of care? No one has looked at continuum care and end of life. So we said, let's look at predictors of continuum care. Third is evaluate the association between our second objective and our first objective, the outcomes in end of life and the continuum of care. And then lastly, explore new measures of continuum of care based on all the learnings from our 3 objectives. So that's how we will write it. We'll write it in step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4 we'll actually just coalesce everything together and translate into something that others can use. Okay, and it needs to be on page 1. Okay, so how I like writing grants is intro, just on the imperative, and then objectives. And it's right up front. And then from there, I don't know if it's here. No. From there, the objectives, how we like it to translate throughout the grant. So objective 1, 2, 3, 4. You have background 1, 2, 3, 4. You have methods 1, 2, 3, 4. You have timelines 1, 2, 3, 4. And it makes the life of the reviewer so much easier when you have very clear objectives with very clear. The rest of the grant is very clear, right? And so you can just skim through it and see what are the pertinent parts. Okay, so methods just approach, brief, details, and impact statement. So impact statement is different from the gap, from the imperative. Impact is how will your grant impact the gaps that are there, right? So you can organize in any way you want, but normally in our research we often do how does it impact local level, at the research level, at policy level, at the population level. That's just one sort of framework, right? You can just use whatever framework you want, but you want to check up all the check boxes of how you're going to make an impact. Okay, so that's our 1-pager, and again, I think the biggest part of our grant writing process, I think, is making sure we have the 1-pager right, and then once you have the 1-pager, everything else will fall into place. I don't know if people who use the same approach probably do, but any thoughts on this? Or alternative approaches? This is just how we work, right? What works for us, but it might not be the same for others. Yeah, Claire?
Peter, I'm rewriting my grant that I'm like, okay, no, I think you're right. I mean, it really is all about, I love the method, and just the way that you explain it, extremely clear,
yeah.
which I know then means that what I'm going to read from you is
yeah.
extremely clear. So, and I think that is the key, is like that, how to get the distill all the thinking that you've been doing for months and make it clear when somebody else reads it.
Yeah, no, it's very true.
Yeah.
And all my 7 tips that, it's all about writing, but sorry, Claire, I interrupted you. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, yes.
So do all your grants have the 5 objectives being describe, identify, evaluate, and explore?
Often. Or I'll show you, I think we have, or admin data, yeah. But sometimes it's, well, with any ISIS work, it's always describe, evaluate, and then predict. Sometimes it's predict, or sometimes the verb is model, yeah, or apply, right? Apply, like a KT, KU kind of thing. For us, we do a lot of risk prognostication, so it's applied on us, web tools, for example, right? So, but it's sequential, right? It makes sense, and you have to have the right verbs there, right? And usually it's describe, evaluate, and then something else, yeah, develop, whatever. Okay, 10 minutes, yeah, Vivian?
Oh, I was going to say, I love the objectives on the first page.
Yeah.
Another thing we've done in the past is have a summary at the top. So the first half of the first paragraph of the first page is the background, objectives, and impact in like 5 sentences.
Exactly, yeah. And
that's
that's
another way to do it, but like yours is also.
Yeah, that's our intro usually. It's a summary of the grant, overall grant, and then specific objectives. Absolutely, yeah, I agree. Yeah. Okay, I only have 10 minutes, but I won't have time to go through it, but maybe I'll go through, I forget what the 7 questions are, but the important ones. So I'm not going to talk about, so there are slides that I can share from that CIHR grant workshop, semi-useful. It's more about the specifics, like picking the right panel, the process, what to include, not include in your common safeties. But those are generalities that, it's easy to pick up. I think it's more kind of the softer things that people miss often. So I think I already went through this, so I'm not going to go through it. The first question or tip is ask yourself, why would anyone care, right? So grantmanship is, is salesmanship. It really is. Too often are we too hard on ourselves about the limitations of our work, and we get down too much on the limitations of what we're doing. It's selling. I mean, you're selling an idea. So often this is how we look at it. That's what we try to do. So you want to be either the first, the biggest, the best, or the last. Okay? So that's what will get you in a high impact journal. Same thing with grants. That's the best ideas are the first, the biggest, the best, or the last. So this is so we add statements on how we are that. Okay, so this is our impact statement for, I think this was our dementia grant. We're gonna generate the first and most comprehensive set of population-based blah blah blah. We're gonna be the first to examine blah blah blah. We're gonna be the first, and we're gonna build something that's world leading. Okay? So you have it's a selling job, and you have to sell it, and you have to believe in your ideas. It's got to be true, obviously, right? but it is a sell, and you can't be ashamed to sell yourself as those things. And if you're not going to be any of these things, then maybe it's not the right grant, right? Because you need to find a niche where you will be the first, the best, the last, world leading, whatever, right? And the good thing with obviously ISIS data, we have the luxury of having the best data. So we always sell that as this is the best data that's available, population-based, largest set of confounders that we can look at, greatest variety of outcomes that we can look at, that anyone can look at. And anyone doing ISIS grant, that should be a no-brainer. Check, 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 check. And you repeat it everywhere. So I'm not going to go through that. So the second thing is it topical? I think we already talked about this. The more topical it is, the easier it is to get not only competitive grants, but softer money. And you need to identify, why the time is right, why in your background, in your imperative. I think, this is a funny one. You don't want to be like this elephant. I just feel so like elephant. Okay. So this is an idea. I mean, this is an example, our intro, right? Our imperative. Trudeau, $3 billion in Ontario. There's been, this report that led to a new investment, and this project we're going to tap into that, and we're going to look at, how to best inform these initiatives. So you make it topical, right? Okay. So this is an obvious one, but people don't do this one. Often don't do this. Can your mom or your colleague understand it, right? It's that level. I mean, it is that level, right? Maybe not mom, but it's colleague, right? Colleague who knows nothing about your field. It's not like this for all sections. That's my caveat. For the methods, it's a different ballgame. You do not want you don't want your mom to understand what you're doing in your methods. If you are, then you're doing something wrong, right? Because we're all experts in this, and the methods can get quite complicated. Okay, so I'm going to show you. You have to write simply, right? So I'm going to show you. Well, this is just kind of like the things that you want the reviewers to say about your grant. So you always aim for the reviewers to say it's well written, that it's a pleasure to read. That's in your mind, you should think about that, and that it's easy to follow and easy to read through. Okay. And part of that is making sure that they don't fall asleep, right? And how do you do that? Is again, there's nothing earth-shattering, but I see it all the time that people don't do this, right? You need clear headings. Okay, you just need clear headings. Every page has to have at least 2 headings. You don't want a page that's all text. And we see that all. I mean, Heidi, you see that all the time. Everyone sees that all the time, right? You want clear headings, no long paragraphs. Emphasize important sentences. If you have a series of interrelated ideas, but they are hard to string together, you don't want to put them into a paragraph. People won't understand it. Instead, you want to say, this is how they're interrelated. These are my points, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's so much easier to understand and read it that way if you do it that way, instead of trying to, as a reviewer, trying to read through, a string of possibly interrelated sentences. Okay, I think this really works really well for us, where we have our objectives that map out to the rest of the grant, right? I mean, we do that quite a bit, right? So we have objective 1, hypothesis 1, methods 1, impact 1, right? And we have clear section headings. I mean, we don't number them. Well, we do number them actually, but we have clear section headings. And in every time we talk about a method, we put in brackets, for example, this is objective 1, objective 2, right? Study diagram. So Amy's the pro at this. So she's really, study diagrams that people can look at, and that because in the CRCR grants, there's going to be one, or most grants, there's going to be one expert or a couple of expert reviewers who are going to present it to the rest of the group. You want to make their life simple, right? Often what we see in our CIHR reviews is that they copy and paste certain things from our grant, right? Just because it's a nice summary of the grant itself. Study diagrams really help them to explain these grants to others. If your idea is complex, break up your studies into phases or study sections, and avoid run-on sentences. So a good test is if you read it out loud, right? And if you sound ridiculous reading it out loud, then you should break up the sentence, right? It's so important, but we all do this, yeah, you want to make your grant pleasure to read. So this is a couple examples of our study diagrams where you kind of tie everything together. So in our study diagrams, we always try to have our objectives in there, right? Because again, you want the objectives, I think, to run throughout. So objective 1 here, objective 2. This is one of our study diagrams for dementia. And then we have some of our methods in there, right? So in objective 1, we're going to look at no dementia to dementia diagnosis. These are the data sources that we're going to include. Okay? These are the community settings that we're actually targeting that's policy relevant. So here we have objectives, we have methods, we have study phase, we have how it's relevant, right? All in one diagram. This is another one that Amy made. You can, sometimes we have very little space. So you put in your timelines, your objectives, your deliverables, right? And the impact, right? And it's all in one, study diagram. You want something that people can just look at and, to guide them. It's like a roadmap, it's like a table of context into the graph, right? And so that makes reading it so much easier and it organizes your thoughts, right? I think I'm out of time almost.
No, you're good. Good.
So that's, everyone needs a study diagram. It doesn't matter if it costs you space, it needs to be there, I think. Don't put it in the appendix, put it in your main.
You put this in your main document.
Yeah, definitely. You want half the page that you sacrifice for writing, it's worth so much more to improve clarity. That's my thought. Vivian saying yes, some of us might say no.
Like that's the most successful grants I think of.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think I've ever seen a grant that has a diagram inside, and I often read that you're not supposed to put tables and pictures, and so that's good to know.
You can, for sure.
Good to know.
You can.
They changed it there, maybe that's it. Yeah. Okay.
Now in the open operating grants,
Yeah.
it's opposite. You shouldn't put things in the appendix unless they might not read it.
Okay. Got it.
Questions, I think? Sarah?
You can put it early in the class so that they look at the diagram before they have read everything.
Yeah, so it happens in the second, third page. Yeah. Ima?
Yeah, it's this question from our online guest, Matthew Minard. His question is, could you tell us how you use your appendices and whether you just said whether figures are included in the grant or outside, and what do you put in your appendices?
We put tons of stuff, and it's all background stuff of what we've done. So sample size calculation, cohort, approach to cohort for, health admin work, cohort building approach. We put, previous work. We put the codes. If you for health admin data, we're looking at, pancreatic cancer. We have all the codes already there. We just put, all the things that no one cares about, but needs to be there to make it sound rigorous, to make it rigorous. I think, I think general principle is, people don't want to read it, but people want to see that you've thought about it. And that's generally what we put in the appendix. Any other questions? Doug?
Yeah. Well, just to reiterate really what you're saying, I think more and more of us are using mixed methods in our designs that incorporate multiple phases.
Yeah.
And a key emphasis with mixed methods is that you incorporate a visual diagram that has these phases laid out. So it just goes with what you're saying. For sure.
It makes sense, right? It just makes it easier to read. No one wants to read all text either, right? Like, the less text, the better.
But Peter, I think if you pick up one, that is a really, both of those, they're really clear diagrams. Obviously you spent a lot of time on those. You didn't just slap them together at the last minute, because that is more destructive.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to, it needs to make sense. It needs to be clear. I think we have, normally, we have a clear idea of what we want in our study diagram. And it might be different things in different studies. And then you just try to visualize that. And some people, like I'm not good at visualizing things. Amy's great, for example. Amy's great at a lot of things, but she's great at visualization as well. So she really helps us with these things. Yeah. These are probably not even the two best ones that Amy has created. She's made some really snazzy ones.
2 minutes, Peter.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. The last thing.
Peter's around for coffee and. So.
Yeah. I think this is probably the counter to what everything I've been saying is that for the method section it's a bit different. It has to be novel. It has to be rigorous. It has to be sound. I think. So you have to know what and sound, like what you're doing, but you can go nuts. Okay, you can. This is the section where you can be very rigorous and very complex, right? But the key here is that you can clutter up that space, but you need to have clear outlines of what you're talking about. So you need to make sure that if you go nuts within the box, that box is clearly reading to your objective 1 or your objective 2. Okay, so it's like organized chaos or organized complexity. That's what I would think about it. This is a great area, obviously, where you can build on previous grants. This is really important, I think. Don't pigeon yourself to one approach. I see this all the time too, where you pigeon yourself to like, we're going to look at in the last 6 months of life. Well, someone might say, why 6 months? Why 3 months? Why 12 months? Never pigeon yourself to an approach or a specific thing, right? You can say we're going to consider these approaches. We're going to tentatively, not tentatively, we plan to look at this multivariable approach. But if it doesn't fit, these are the contingency plans, and these are the other ways that we're going to look at the issue, right? So you want to make sure that, because reviewers often will have the area of specialty, where you go counter what the area of specialty, they might not agree with you. And so you never want to pigeon yourself into one approach, because it can go wrong, right? The last tip is that, for methods, I think you go from the forest to the trees to the branches to the leaves. Okay, so you do an outline of what your method is, then you go to the to the forest, the objectives, to the trees, sub-objectives, to the leaves, statistical methods, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this is how I teach my public health persons when you answer any question. To organize complexity, you organize in that way. Okay, I think that's all I have the time for. Okay. Yeah. So the last, I'm just sorry guys, but oh yeah, the team is another thing too. So I'm going to end up with this because the team needs to be there, right? And you need to have experts in everything that you're doing. So this is, do you guys know what movie this is from? I think you can. So Leonardo DiCaprio, right? So in one of my favorite exchanges with his dad, who was, what's his name? Christopher Walken, Frank Applegate Sr. asks Leonardo DiCaprio, why do the Yankees always win, Frank? So Leonardo said, cause they have Mickey Mantle, they have the talent. And he says, no, it's because the other teams can't stop staring at those pinstripes, okay? So it's a little, cheeky, but you have to look like you know what you're doing, and you have to be the team that will get it done, okay? And part of that is, obviously the Yankees are the Yankees, but a lot of that is, they have the talent within the team, right? So you need to have a competent team. And if you don't have it, believe it or not, most senior people are very happy to collaborate, right? I haven't had the experience where, you ask someone and, if you pick the right people, most people are happy to collaborate. That's my experience. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Peter. So I just want to tell you, we'll take 5 minutes, and then we'll come to the next presentation. We took a little more time, so please try to get your coffee really quickly. And I also, just in case any one of you doesn't know, Heidi Zweistok, who is the CEO of BRI, and Peggy Taillon, who is the president of